Greetings all and welcome to a joint event between Technology Association of Oregon and Onward Eugene. This is the Return to Work Forum. And if we haven't had the chance to meet yet, I'm Sally Bell. I'm the Executive Director and Vice President of Southern Willamette Valley for TAO. And believe it or not, this week marks week 51 of pandemic life for both working from home and schooling from home. And nearly a year later, our lives have forever been transformed, as are the ways that we consider the future of work and the future of learning. As vaccinations become more of a reality and businesses and schools begin to reopen, we're all grappling with what a new normal looks like. Today, we will hear from local professionals here in Southern Willamette Valley about their strategies and decision-making for return to work and school. And now I'll turn it over to my collaborator, Nicole Dash with Onward Eugene. Take it away, Nicole.
Hello. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. I'm Nicole Dash, Onward Eugene's Business Support Manager. Onward Eugene is focused on inclusive prosperity, and conversations like today's are key to growing our economy. We help to provide businesses with leadership training through our RISE program, encourage entrepreneurship and innovation through the Huge Launchpad and Small Business Accelerator programs, support local businesses and help them, and we market this community to businesses who are a strategic fit for the region. We are a Get Stuff Done organization. If your plan for getting your staff back to work includes hiring new people, we should talk. One of the programs I have in my toolbox is funds to help you train new hires, so let's connect. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here today, and I would like to especially thank one of our sponsors, Evans, Elder, Brown, and Subert, for helping to sponsor this event today. Thank you. Back to you, Sally.
Thanks, Nicole. Today, we're also joined by Ruthie Ditzler, our Special Events and Marketing Coordinator at TAO. Should you have any questions or issues during the webinar, feel free to send her a private note through the TAO admin profile. Thanks, Ruthie. Just a few rules of engagement before we start. All participants have been muted. If you prefer, you may ask or respond to questions in the chat box publicly or privately by direct messaging us. We'll monitor that chat box and respond throughout the discussion. And we ask that you also engage via the participant icon on your screen. We welcome you to engage with us on social media during this event throughout the day. We love sharing what's happening at TAO and at Onward to get participant takeaways from our events. So our social handles are right there on the slide. Please also keep in mind that this is a timely panel and also time sensitive. What is discussed today may only be relevant today or even in the next few weeks based on how swiftly things are changing and evolving. So keep that in mind as you share out these insights with your colleagues and networks. Due to limited time, and we anticipate there's going to be some really excellent questions, we'll capture all the questions in the chat, and any that we don't get to, we'll make sure we get answered later on our online member engagement platform. That's called Mobilize. It's our TAO member-only virtual community, and our guests will provide written responses there to any unanswered questions from our event. If you have any questions about Mobilize or joining TAO, please reach out to us, membership@techoregon.org. And a huge thank you to our sponsors and partners for making this event possible. Lane Workforce Partnership has been a long-time supporter of all of our engagements here in Southern Willamette Valley, so thanks to them. And a huge thanks to the District Co-working for sponsoring this event. And I also want to mention that they're running a special promotion through April 1st for event attendees today. Please reach out directly to panelist Amanda Yankovic to schedule a tour. And TAO is also excited to be an early sign-on for the district space. And I'm definitely ready to return to work at the district this spring. And thanks also to Evans, Elder, Brown, and Subert for sponsoring Onward, and such a great partnership to bring these events to you all together. So without further ado, and the reason we're all here, it's my pleasure to welcome our moderator, Celeste Marshall. She's Senior Director of People Strategy and Operations at EVO Partners. Take it away, Celeste.
Thank you. Thank you to Sally and Nicole for hosting this incredibly relevant event with very knowledgeable panelists. I'm excited to get to know everyone. Like Sally said, I'm Celeste Marshall. I'm with Uofo Business Partners, a full-service accounting and business consulting firm here in Eugene. I've spent my career leading lots of private organizations through periods of change and growth in strategic HR roles, most recently in the tech industry and now in a consulting capacity with various industries. Very familiar with the endless unique challenges that were thrown at all of us this last year. And I'm excited to talk to this amazing group of panelists. So let's get to know them, shall we? We're going to go around the screen and allow each panelist to give a short bio about who they are and what they do. So let's start with, and oh, interestingly enough, just as a housekeeping item, we do have 2 Celestes and 2 Amandas, which I think we can handle, but you might hear a little mix up and I'll use people's first initials of their last names for clarity. All right, Celeste Peterson, do you want to start us out?
Thank you, Celeste, and thanks for having me on this panel. I'm delighted to be here. I am the Director of People Development for Palo Alto Software here in Eugene, Oregon, and I support our team of just about 70 people who are currently fully remote, a couple of people using the office occasionally, but for the most part, we're all still working from home for about a year now and are looking forward to changing that a little bit in the coming few months. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation as we're all trying to figure out what that looks like. I think that the pandemic has certainly changed what the workplace, especially in the tech industry, will look like forever for the ongoing future. So we're all determining, how to manage that and continue the company culture that has been so special to us, including the personal connections with the people we work with. Thanks so much.
That's great. Thank you for adding your current status of your organization and some thoughts about the future. We'll keep that going as we go around the group as well. Cass, do you want to go next?
Hi, yes, thanks for having me participate in this today. I'm Cass Mosley. I'm the Vice President for Research and Innovation at the University of Oregon. I'm also a research professor, and we're a study, among other things, rural economic development. So not exactly TAO's universe, but an adjacent universe. And I was deeply involved in the university. I have been from the beginning deeply involved in the university's response to COVID, including the process of, going remote with research, along with our instructional activities. We have all along been in a hybrid status because some of the things we do, from maintaining our buildings and keeping our research operations going, require people to be on campus. We've also been teaching some courses in person all along. And over time, we've been sort of doing more and more, in person, from, fan-free women's basketball games to, to all kinds of activities. And we are looking forward to, over the course of the summer, increasing our in-person and on-campus activities, with the plan that in the fall we will be most of our instruction will be in person on campus. So I'll stop there, and happy to look forward to all the questions.
Great, thank you. All right, Amanda Walkup.
Hi, my name is Amanda Walkup. I am an attorney here in Eugene with the firm Hirschner Hunter. My area of practice focuses on labor and employment, and I focus almost exclusively with employers. So I spend a fair amount of my time giving advice to employers on how to manage their workplace generally. And so for this last 51 weeks, I guess it's been, I'm working diligently with my clients on how to navigate all of the regulatory and other practical issues related to having a business during COVID. So that's been my focus for the last year. Separately, I am also a business owner. I'm a partner here at the firm. We have about 45 employees. We are located downtown Eugene. And so in addition to my business life, we were also trying to keep our firm up and running. And so we had to pivot, as did all other employers, moving our folks home. So the vast majority of our employees have been working from home pretty much exclusively since this whole thing happened. A few of us are working in the office. So we've had to do that side of things too, as far as getting everybody up and running remotely and learning Zoom and all other types of video conferencing. And we are also looking forward to getting our folks back as soon as possible safely and in compliance with all of the state rules. So that's who I am. And thanks very much for including me.
Great, thank you. All right, Jeremy. Are you there? Might be muted.
You're on mute.
Try that again. My name is Jeremy Scriver. I'm the owner operator of Jackalope Lounge in Eugene, Oregon. I have been in the restaurant business for about 20 years now, managing restaurants, managing people, and I'm honored to be here representing the restaurant industry, which has been adversely affected in this pandemic and kind of crazy times for everybody. But yeah, that's me.
Great, thank you. All right, Amanda Y. Yankovic.
Hello. Thank you so much, TAO and Onward Eugene, for hosting this event. I think this is an incredible conversation and I look forward to it. I'm Amanda Yankovic. I'm the Managing Director for the District Co-working and Flex office here in Eugene. Talk about a crazy year. We have had the opportunity to plan and replan our business model and really focused on the new ways of work, right? So the future of work. We've been able to adapt to lots of different new regulations and everything that have been coming up to make it sustainable long-term and really bring that safety throughout the space. So I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but I'm really looking forward to opening up. We're only a couple weeks away from opening and it'll be here before we know it.
Let me unmute myself first. All right, let's jump on in. We have lots of questions pre-planned, and we'll go through the questions and our panelists can answer them. And then obviously if there are questions in the chat box, we can answer those as we go. So first question is about 4J schools. They just recently announced that they are going to start reopening in the spring. And curious how that affects plans to return to work as employers consider childcare plans and all that is in support of that. Celeste, I think we talked previously about just the considerations that employers have to include in the conversation around childcare and support. Can you talk a little bit about Palo Alto's decision-making about that? Good.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I think, for our employees who are parents with school-age children, they've been hugely affected this past year and probably will continue to be for the rest of this school year at least. I think that more than anything, what happens in schools this spring and maybe even next fall will impact our plans to or the way that we come back to the office more than anything. When we're all able to get vaccines, our plan is to allow the employees who are fully vaccinated to have the option to use the office again. But we have so many parents with young children who will probably still continue to work from home, depending on what this hybrid school situation looks like this spring, which we all have a lot of questions about that. It sounds like the kids will be in school some days of the week, but they'll be home some days too. And what does that look like? And will they still have a full Zoom course schedule, or will parents, be doing, continue to be doing a lot of the guidance when kids are at home? They also have to probably do a lot of shuttling. So even though we're so excited to get vaccinated and to come back to the office, we foresee that it'll still be quite a while before the majority of our staff will be able to come back in based on their childcare needs.
Right. Thank you. So we happen to have two big players in the conversation around education. University of Oregon obviously is a huge front runner in decision making locally. So Cass, can you tell us a little bit about Uofo's plans for returning to in-person instruction?
Sure. So it's sort of, I alluded to at the beginning, the president, the university president announced, well, I think it was last week after the governor provided her detailed plan for rollout of vaccinations, that our plan is to be mostly in person in the fall. We'll probably have a little bit more in the summer than we do now in terms of in-person classes, but then we really hope to be welcoming all of our students in person in the fall. We know, or we expect, we're planning for the likelihood that distancing and masks will still be part of our lives in the fall. And so we hedge a little bit on this sort of in person, because bigger classes may not be able to be accommodated in the traditional way of putting everybody in a large auditorium. So we've got a lot of details to work through, but we've actually spent a good amount of time with, GIS maps of every single classroom on campus, and every we've already marked and moved furniture and things like that. So we're prepared to bring people back, but of course this is all a stepwise process that is done very carefully, and we're assuming that we stay on the trajectory we're on. If we've learned anything in the last year, next week is not last week, and we'll see. But we're hard focused on in-person instruction. And then, that will also include, as you know, and most universities these days have some amount of not remote, what we call remote, which is sort of teaching the class on Zoom that you would have taught if you were in the classroom. But there's always hybrid and online instruction, which is designed from the ground up to be online. And we would anticipate that we would continue to provide those courses as well. But we expect most of our undergraduates and graduate students to be in Eugene, Portland, or Charleston by next fall, having the residential experience that people really value about the University of Oregon.
Great, thank you. Jeremy, if you could, I'd love to hear your perspective on how 4J and Uofo's decisions are impacting the restaurant industry.
Well, first of all, being a proud father of two, I want my kids to get back into school. Seeing the adverse effects on their emotional states, I want to get them back with their friends, and back to some sort of normal. And with my wife being in education as well, I like to, we like to think that the sooner the better, and seeing the positive effects it has on kids. But it's also a challenge trying to juggle work and home life, because I've been at home for, 4 months now, unemployed. It's been easier for us because I've been a stay-at-home dad, but it's not that easy for other people and individuals dealing with, especially in the restaurant industry, and including my employees that are trying to balance work and home life and schedules and days on and days off, and trying to find childcare within that mix has been difficult for a lot of people that I know, and not just in my field. So yeah, I hope to see that kids get back into school soon, but I also think that there's a shortage of childcare for people that need it right now, and there's a lot of nannies being hired and such by friends of mine. So yeah, I think that it's continuing on. I'd like to see maybe people working together to try to get some sort of a plan together to get some more childcare available for people in all phases of business. And hopefully that with vaccines rolling out, that'll come maybe ease some of this craziness. So
great. Thanks for that segue. Actually, vaccines are the next subject. So let's switch. Let's talk a bit about the subject that's, I know, top of mind for most employers right now. Impacts around vaccine rollout. I'm curious specifically to hear from Amanda Walkup about current state of regulations, incentivizing, requiring, all the topics around this subject.
Sure. So first of all, keep in mind that this is a moving target, meaning it changes potentially every day. Nothing yet is written in stone. So I do caution employers from developing any sort of permanent vaccine policy at this point. What we do know is that under the EEOC, they have stated that federally employers are in a position to be able to require employees to get the vaccine, subject to 2 caveats. One has to do with disabilities. So you're going to, inevitably, there will be some folks out there who have allergies or other medical conditions that prevent them from getting a vaccine. So what we do know is that any sort of vaccine mandate will have to have some allowance for individuals who physically or medically are unable to get them. And then the other huge carve out under the EEOC guidance is religious. So there will be some religious beliefs, people who have strongly held or sincerely held religious beliefs that may prevent them from getting vaccines. So the first thing to keep in mind as you are considering whether or not, EEOC stands for the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. So thank you for that. So any sort of mandatory or any sort of vaccine policy, whether it's mandatory or suggestive, should consider those 2 pieces, and that piece we know that's set in federal law. The reason why I'm hesitant to say that anybody at this point can mandate vaccines is because under the FDA, Food and Drug Administration, which is actually the governmental body that is managing the vaccine process, all 3 vaccines that have been approved in the US so far have been approved under what's called the Emergency Use Authorization Approval. So the EUA, and within the FDA regulations, it clearly states that vaccines that are approved under the EUA cannot be mandated unless there's certain disclaimers or disclosures. Right now, there's a big dispute in the legal community as to whether or not they can be mandated at all, because they are right now, theoretically, they are experimental. So should you be mandating experimental drugs? So that's one school of thought under the FDA regulation interpretation. The other one is that, you can mandate it, but if you're going to, you have to disclose a whole set of criteria, including the circumstances or the consequences if you reject the vaccine. So that interpretation of the regulation is still in play. And until that's resolved, as somebody who represents employers, I'm recommending to my clients, nobody mandate anything, because we don't know if that would violate federal law. Also, what could happen, and right now it's somewhat premature, because somebody of my age and my health condition, I'm probably going to I'll be the last person probably in line. So until everybody has access, the idea of thinking about mandating it is somewhat premature anyway. The other thing is we don't know when the EUA will be flipped over to permanent. So it could be that at any point, any of the 3 vaccines could be deemed to be out of the EUA and actually approved. And at that point, then this whole thing I'm talking about becomes moot. So it's something to be considering, but it's definitely, I would say, premature to be enacting as far as any sort of mandatory vaccine policy. Other things we don't know yet is how are you even going to be able to prove whether or not an employee has a vaccine? What is the deal with the passports? I've heard conversation on a federal level that for purposes of traveling or going to large gatherings, that there's going to be this federally created passport, vaccine passport. I don't know what that looks like. We don't know. Right now, I've understood that people are getting cards. Can those cards be forged? Can they be doctored? The other thing is asking whether or not a person has obtained a vaccine. Is that a medical exam, which is regulated under both state and federal law? So there again are a lot of unanswered questions that we simply are too early in the process to be able to prove, but it's something that eventually we will probably need, is to document whether or not somebody got a vaccine. Some employers are interested in seeing whether or not it makes sense to be providing their own vaccines. So in other words, they have somebody in-house that gives the shots. I would recommend that if you're going down that road, that you check with your legal counsel, because there are a lot of traps for that, both related to just automatic liability, you know, what happens if the shot doesn't go well, but then also you have to ask a bunch of questions before you can administer the shot. And are you now asking about medical information that you otherwise really do not want to know anything about? So is it something that's better handled by a third-party administrator? And all you do at the end is get a little card that says, yeah, Amanda Walkup got the vaccine, check the box. that's something else. I don't know that that necessarily is something that most employers are going to want to bite off. Incentivizing, you know, you're hearing a lot of folks, some of the larger employers are out there saying that they're going to give $100 incentivizing, or they're going to, you know, if they make it mandatory or whatever that looks like. Keep in mind that there's actually some regulations that relate to when employers can make incentivizing plans related to employees' health. And historically, this had to do with smoking, weight loss, exercising, all of that normal get better wellness plan stuff. That actually is regulated. And again, it comes down to how much medical condition or medical information should an employer have. So now when you're starting to think about incentivizing vaccines, you're in the same bucket of rules and regulations that you would be if you're talking about smoking. And currently the EEOC has not really made it clear as to whether or not they're going to do a carve out for vaccines. So once again, great idea, think about it, don't promise anything, don't implement anything, because the rules have not yet caught up with us. And the last thing you want to be doing is making promises that then if you ultimately come through with those, you've just violated some sort of a wellness plan rule that is not what your plan was. So again, if you really feel strongly about your employees getting the vaccine, that's fantastic. You can always verbally encourage them. But as far as giving a kicker, a financial kicker, I'd be very cautious about that until we get more clarity from the government. So that's kind of the nutshell where we are right now, which is a lot more questions than answers. Hopefully, as the vaccine becomes more commonly available, and as the federal government and the state governments are able to catch up with all of this, I'm imagining by May, we will probably have a lot more clarity, and it might be worthwhile at that point to tune back in. You know, you're going to see stuff in the paper as this all unfolds, but that in a nutshell is what we're looking at is, can it be mandated? Yes or no? Can you incentivize? Yes or no? What kind of information can you ask for from your employees to confirm whether or not they've been vaccinated? And also keep in mind whether or not you need to be making accommodations, which under federal and state law you currently do, if they've got medical conditions that prevent them from getting the vaccine, or if they have some sort of religious, strongly held religious belief that prevents them from doing that.
It's incredible. Thank you. That's really helpful. All right. On those same lines of thought, I'm curious and interested in hearing about some of the changes that businesses or panelists on this group, their businesses have had to make in regard to some of the new regulations around health, safety, security, risk management in the workplace.
Celeste, before we go on to that, can I just weigh in with one more thing on vaccines? Please. So there's a, and I sort of want to respond to a question in the chat, which has gone by on this topic. So Amanda's really focused rightly on this sort of complex legal environment of vaccinations. But we know first and foremost that what we need right now is shots in arms. And so I just want to make sure that folks are aware that there's a large sort of vaccine collaborative that has emerged in Lane County that involves Lane County Public Health, the Lane County Emergency Management, the University of Oregon, Lane Community College, and others, and all the hospitals, and everybody has come together and pooled vaccines and has started. We've been hosting these what we're calling mass vaccination clinics using what we learned from the meningitis outbreak and other and obviously the Uofo knows how to get people into football stadiums on Saturdays. And so we're using that experience to really work together to really accelerate the pace of getting folks vaccinated through drive-through mass vax events and things like that. And we'll continue. We've been running two different locations at a time. Typically, we anticipate when there are more vaccines, the ability to hold a third. And so our ability as a community to get vaccinated and make it easy and simple and low stress for people is really, really critical. So we're very proud to be a part of that very large complex collaborative process. So I wanted to mention that. And then there was another question in the chat, just while I have the floor, around the positivity rate at the University of Oregon, because obviously that's been in the news a bit. And I wanted to talk about a couple things in that rate. One is that the rates in Lane County and at the University of Oregon among our students have gone way, way down very rapidly. And so the things we saw, the concern that we saw in the community as a whole in the beginning of January is really a new day today. And then I just wanted to, I think most people know this, but because we've been trying to advertise it, we have mandatory testing for all of our weekly mandatory testing for everybody who lives in the dorms at the Uofo, and then we make available to the community asymptomatic testing to basically anybody who wants to sign up. We make hundreds of tests available for people who are not sick but are asymptomatic, and we've encouraged obviously our off-campus students, but any member of the community who wants to get a test. And that's actually one of the things that's different about Lane County than other places, is because we're doing 700, 800 asymptomatic tests per day during the week. We have a lot more testing going on in Lane County than we do in other places. This is a really, really good thing. It also means our data sometimes looks a little weird because we're finding people who otherwise wouldn't have been tested through the medical system. That's a good public health decision, but sometimes it makes people nervous. So I wanted, and Malia, if that was not responsive to your point, please speak up.
Great, thank you. Thanks for adding that to the conversation. So switching slightly, but still sort of in the same conversation, if you will, because we're in this in-between period where vaccines haven't rolled out entirely. We're considering bringing people back into work and school environments. And so curious to hear about how spaces are evolving, or thoughts on changes that you've made to health, safety, like we talked about before, security, risk management, physical space, office layouts. So Amanda Yankovic, I know you have a lot to say about space planning. Why don't you jump in on that initially?
Yeah, well, like I mentioned, I mean, we really had the opportunity to plan with all of the new rules and regulations coming out for workspace design and all of that. So we've done lots and lots of research and are really looking again for that sustainable model that will carry us on to the future here, the future of work. So things like behavioral things, so we'll have directional signage and whatnot to really help with the flow. That's another thing that we see a lot in workspaces, is there's that where the drinking fountains are, there's a really tiny hallway and it tends to get clogged. So we are really going to work on that directional signage. Of course, we'll have wellness checks as soon as you come in. Not every co-working space does this, but I know for us, safety is our #1 priority. So we really are going to maybe do a little bit more than we maybe need to. But we will have temperature checks and making sure that you wear a mask in all the public spaces. You can have a mask off if you're in your actual private office. But just little things like that to really kind of get people thinking about the safety of others in the space as well. So it's not only keeping you safe as an employee, but we want to keep everyone else in the space safe as well. Same thing with collaboration areas. So instead of just the break room or our cafe space, for example, there's going to be collaborative areas all over the space, and I think that's going to help again unclog some of those collaboration spaces. I know another thing, a lot of traditional offices, you have your break room, and that's where everyone goes to chat or whatnot. So we are just kind of changing some of that stuff. I know really collaboration is very, very important, and I think that's what a lot of people are missing out on at-home work. I mean, it's hard to connect with people in a virtual capacity, especially your coworkers that you see every day. So just trying to find different safe ways to do that. We will have lots of different types of events, but again, we're going to have it be a limited capacity. We've definitely taken some of our elements out. So instead of having as many desks in the private or in the public space, we're definitely limiting that. We have made sure to do the distancing between all of the different areas, all the different desks. So that will be something that will probably continue for the unforeseen future, right? A lot of things are just changing, and that's okay, and that's what we've set up for. And then everything touchless as much as we can, touchless fixtures, and we really want you to be able to come in the space and not have to worry about any of that. You don't want to have to worry about touching even the coffee pot. We want to put the nanoseptic wraps on the coffee pot. So I mean, little things like that are really going to just carry throughout the entire space. And these are also a lot of changes that you can make in your own space too. So we're seeing a lot of traditional type office spaces make some of these developments as well.
That's great.
Yeah.
So I know there's several businesses that are considering this question in light of hybrid workforces. So it's much more to consider when you're talking about some people being remote, some people being in live variations. And so I'm curious, Celeste, if you could jump in on what does that look like for meeting space, for space considerations and layouts, and with people in different capacities. What are you guys considering?
Thanks. Yeah, that's a lively conversation these days, trying to figure out what a hybrid situation would look like, because like I said, in the tech industry, what the workplace will look like post-pandemic has probably changed forever. So many tech companies have announced that they plan to either stay all remote long-term or have more of a remote first kind of work arrangement, which, meaning that remote work is a norm, and then some types of work or meetings or projects happen in person, or people have the option to work in the office if they prefer, but it's more of a remote first kind of situation. Our company has always been remote friendly, meaning before the pandemic, we often had a lot of people who maybe worked from home 1 day a week. We never all worked all remote all the time until now. And now we've learned a lot of things about what's possible remotely. And so we expect that even though, our company culture highly values collaboration and some of the sort of, serendipitous interactions that can happen when you're in the office together, a lot of people have found advantages to having more remote possibilities. So we'll probably have more remote work than we used to. And so then that calls into question things like, well, what if we have a meeting with 7 people, 2 or 3 of them are working remote, the rest are in a room together? We've tried to do that before the pandemic, and it's pretty awkward. I think a lot of you have experienced, the couple of people who are remote, joining by speakerphone or video, feel not quite as involved in the conversation as the people who are together. I think there's new technology being developed now to try to help resolve some of that. I think that we may do some things like, even if you're in a room together, if someone's remote, then you're all on a laptop and, we're still meeting in this Brady Bunch kind of visual format. And so that everyone is included. And, right now we've been using our meeting rooms. We have a pretty open office format in our office. So it's mostly, you call them cubicles, but they're even pretty low walls. So there's because we collaborate so often across teams and within teams. And then we have some meeting rooms. Well, right now, meeting rooms have turned into offices for the people who need to use the office so they can take their mask off and work. When we come back more large scale, we'll have to think about that transition, how many people are allowed in a room together at the same time, or, how do we need to create more spaces where people can take a video call without disrupting the people around them? Again, like I think Amanda Walkup said earlier, we have more questions than answers right now, but there's definitely got to be some reinventing. There's a lot of great new technology being invented, like I said, for better video collaboration or remote collaboration. So we intend to try out a lot of that and see how it can work, even when we are able to be in the office and create some kind of hybrid situation with even more flexibility, which I think the increased remote flexibility could have great advantages for things like the diversity of people we can recruit. We could recruit talent from farther away. We could recruit from people who live in rural areas as long as they have good access to strong internet connections. And people with families, you know, there are probably a lot of advantages to more flexibility, large scale across the world. There's also challenges with that. There's, you know, if we recruit from out of state, there's the issue of every state has different employment and tax rules. And so we're not really sure if we want to do that yet because of the expense and the complications. So a lot to figure out, and I'd really welcome continued conversation after this meeting between companies to figure out solutions to these things.
That's great. Thank you. I want to jump into the hiring and onboarding impacts, but before we do that, Amanda, if you're interested, walk up. If you're interested, I'd love to hear. Oregon OSHA rules are lengthy, and maybe every employer in this room has a distancing officer now. If you want to talk about how that impacts things like office layouts and, you know, all the considerations around those new rules.
Yeah, so again, just on the technical compliance side, keep in mind that under the OHA, Oregon Health Authority, and Oregon OSHA guidance right now, or Oregon OSHA regulations right now, even though we've dropped, Lane County has dropped, and some of the other counties have dropped levels, the rule still is that you are supposed to be working from home if you can. So as you are opening up your offices, keep in mind that there are rules, there are regulations out there under Oregon OSHA that you will still have to be in compliance with until those get modified. And so I'm not going to go into all of them because they are dependent upon the industry. If you do not know what I'm talking about, I highly recommend that you Google OR-OSHA, Oregon OSHA. They have specific rules. And as Celeste said, you've got to have, there are requirements about certain programs that you need to have adopted. You have to have a compliance officer. You need to have been doing training. So again, if you don't know what I'm talking about, you're a little bit behind, so you probably want to catch up. But then as you are going forward and you're looking to start opening up your office, just make sure that you are remaining to be in compliance with those. I have heard from multiple clients that they are getting complaints from employees and members of the public. And so Oregon OSHA compliance is out there knocking on doors and sending out letters. So do not fall into any sort of complacency thinking that now that we're quasi opening up and that vaccines are becoming more available, that all of this stuff went away, because it has not. So that's just my plug for regulatory compliance. And again, the Oregon OSHA, they've got a really great website. And also the really cool thing is there is a consultant side of their agency that is completely on compliance. They are non-judgmental. They are not technical compliance. They are purely there to consult. So if you do not know what you should be doing, give them a call, send them an email, they will help you. So that's my plug for Oregon OSHA.
Awesome. Thank you. Always a fun subject. So let's jump in. I think that was a good segue from Celeste Peterson about hiring and onboarding, specifically around retention. I'm curious from the panelists, and maybe this is an opportunity for anybody to jump in. Maybe Cass, you can get us started about how that has looked different. Will you allow employees to continue to work remotely? And just how all the considerations around potentially offering different amenities, unique opportunities for people to be enticed to come back.
Thanks for this. You know, this is a really complicated question for all employers, but I think for the University of Oregon or big universities and big employers with very diverse workforces. And, you know, there are people at the University of Oregon who were working remote before, and now but we're a residential university, and the range of things are really diverse, from the people running the power plant to people who are in research labs to people who are teaching, people who are cleaning facilities, people who are running the dining halls and the dorms and the childcare facilities and the student rec center. And so the range of options for our employees is incredibly variable and incredibly dependent on the particulars of their job. Some people faculty doing, writing a book about their research was probably doing it at their kitchen table before, and they probably will continue to do it that way. So, we have been, but, so we have the ultimate "it depends" kind of conversation. What's interesting actually is that these very different divisions of the university, right? We have advancement that has, which does a lot of the philanthropy work, and they have really said, hey, let's take a step back and look at industry standards. Oh, look, one of the things we learned or we know is that actually development officers who live near the people that they're working with, the philanthropists themselves, they are actually the most successful. Let's maybe think about more people actually living in Bend and in Portland and in Chicago or wherever. So, but that's a very, very different sort of kind of considerations than the people who run the power plant. And so what we are already doing is having conversations kind of division by division to say, well, if you're a financial aid officer, what is the scenario for you? Look, you need to be ready for, to be able to deal with students who show up and need to sort out their financial aid checks. So we have a lot of conversation ahead. And I think one of the other interesting things as we've been talking about over the course of the year is people's opinion about whether they want to be remote or be in person has really changed over time. People maybe first they're like, grumble, I don't want to be home. Then they're like, woo, I'm at home. And now they're like, oh God, I can't wait till I get back. So I would expect that it's actually kind of going to be hard to tell what people want until we can really imagine that the in-person and obviously many different jobs have a different set of choices available. I would say on the recruitment issue, we're seeing some fairly interesting, or at least in my unit, which is the research office, we have a lot of research administrators who, are responsible for managing our grants and our compliance. And we're seeing, we have lost employees during COVID times to other universities, but the person literally like a Thursday they were working for us and, on Friday they were working for Stanford and they didn't move and there were no plan. I'm making up Stanford, it's not a real example. But whatever, people are other universities are able to recruit people. And so we will probably be in a situation for certain kinds of jobs where we're going to be recruiting nationally. And even frankly, potentially globally, and then having to figure out where people are going to live and whether a position will be able to be remote. And so I think those dynamics are very much still to be sorted out. But at the end of the day, we're a residential campus, and a lot of thousands of our employees need to physically come to work every day when we're fully operational. So we like everybody else is having a lot of conversations about this, and we don't know in any great detail how we're going to land.
Great, thank you. Curious, I know of several employers that are considering letting go of their physical space and using some solutions like co-working space. Curious from both Amanda Yankovic and Amanda Walkup if you've seen any great examples of employers utilizing that hybrid model and allowing employees to continue to work remotely if they want, and how they're going to go about that in a strategic way. Amanda Yankovic, if you want to jump in first.
Yeah, that's definitely something we're seeing more and more. I've had conversations with several different business owners and other co-working spaces across the world too. And we're seeing more of this is that larger companies are closing their offices, but they want to be able to provide their employees with some type of alternative from working from home. Working from home for a lot of people isn't sustainable, and it's not, they're not set up for it. And we want to make sure that our employees are set up for success, and no matter what business we're in, right? So, co-working specifically is a great solution for that. So you don't need your big office space, but you can still have your employees that want to go to an office and have that sense of community or collaboration. Co-working is a great solution for that. We have also been talking to some businesses that half of their workforce wants to work from home, the other half wants to come in. So they're going to do some type of hybrid where they meet at the office at the co-working space once a week, and that way they can get all their team members together, but then the majority of the time they're working in different places. It provides an opportunity that we haven't really seen a lot of in the past. And everyone always thought that you needed to be under one roof to be productive. And we've realized that That's not necessarily true. You know, it definitely helps. But giving the employees that flexibility, I think, is a huge amenity too, and a huge recruitment tool if we're talking about the future of work.
Great. Amanda, walk up, even if you want to jump in as an employer on, you know, unique offerings, I suppose is the best way to say that employers are considering right now, as they're considering leaving employees remote and what that looks like from a hiring and onboarding and retention perspective.
Right. Well, actually, and we did this, we're moving our office in the end of this year, and we were supposed to take 2 floors, and we dropped our space to 1.5 floors because we've had enough positive feedback from folks that really, even if they come into the office, they don't see themselves being here full time. So the space that they would want is smaller. So we have done that ourselves. But what I see from an employer's perspective is kind of, you know, if I could see the whites of your eyes and I know where you are as a warm body every day, I feel I have some control over you. And when you're out there in the ether and you're not answering my phone, I deal with the folks that are, where are they? And I don't know where they are. I can't have any accountability. So I've been working a lot with clients on managing employee expectations, and anything from office hours, you better be available from this time to this time. And yeah, you can get up in the middle of the night in your pajamas and finish up a project, but you still got to be available by the phone from this time to this time. So dealing with that, dealing with, if I give you a laptop, I want my laptop back if you leave. What happens if you leave and you don't give me my laptop back? Especially if you are in another state, you have a lot less control. So a lot of that too is, as employers are looking for these more permanent, flexible workplace arrangements, you know, it does come back to, at some point, there needs to be accountability. You need to have policies and procedures in place. You need to make sure that you are consistent in a non-discriminatory fashion as to who gets to stay home, and it's not based off of gender. It's not based off of, oh, you're a mom or you're a dad, I'll let you do this, but you don't have any kids, so no. And do your pets really count as family? And all of the conversations that happen as people are negotiating what they want their workplace to look like. So that's kind of where I get it more involved, is on the compliance side. And those are just factors or considerations that I'm hearing from employers all the time.
Nice, thank you. Jeremy, similarly, I'm interested to hear from the restaurant industry perspective, how you think or how you've been impacted by hiring changes, by workforce shifting, you know, just the restaurant industry trying to stay alive. What does that look like for you under the hiring and onboarding retention umbrella?
Well, you know, in the continuous changes that are made in the restaurant industry, it's been absolutely nuts. And trying to keep my employees, and especially my management. I lost one of my managers because he was looking, you know, he's got a family, and I understand that what we're providing as a business is not stability at this point. So I did lose a manager to that. And so I've been dealing with trying to work the best with the employees that I have right now, and just trying to accommodate what I can and provide for them while we're open for this period of time. I can't provide a stability for people right now, which is my biggest fight. So hopefully that changes, like I said. And you know, there's also a lot of people being in the in-person line of work and dealing with the public on a daily basis, and seeing hundreds of people changes people's minds about coming to work, you know, and being on that exposure level that, you know, a lot of people don't see. So, and, you know, I don't blame people for not wanting to come to work. And if they're in situations where they're taking care of parents, and, you know, I have employees that are taking care of elderly moms and dads and can't be exposed. So working around logistically, it's been hard, but, you know, I think everybody that's in the hospitality industry is dealing with one way or another, trying to figure out how we're going to move forward with that. And the hardest part is not knowing what the future holds, and being able to prepare and offer people employment that's steady for the future. So,
right. Thank you. Similarly, under that same topic, Celeste Peterson, I wonder if you can speak to any unique solutions that you've found for hiring and onboarding. I know you guys have hired in the last 51 weeks. And what does that look like to onboard somebody remotely? Have you found any unique ways of doing that, or successful ways?
Sure. Yeah, that's been interesting. Again, there are some challenges and benefits to doing that remotely. And before the pandemic, we did do some hiring remotely, especially if we were recruiting someone who was planning on relocating here. And so we had some technology in place for that. We've done video interviews before. My recruiting has been primarily online. There's no more in-person recruiting events or company tours like we used to have in our office, the tech tour and things like that. So I've had to, get really good at searching for people online and doing some online networking. But then there's interesting challenges to doing all of your interviewing and screening and onboarding remote. And unfortunately for the people who we have hired since the pandemic, they've never met anybody in person that they're working with. And I think that impacts your the way that you collaborate with each other. I know people who used to work together in the office have said it's a little different experience now having a meeting with them remotely when you have at least had a history together in person and you've learned a lot about how to communicate with each other and collaborate with each other. And then for the people who I think have onboarded remotely, that can be a challenge. And so we also had some, in place before the pandemic, a learning management system that's an online tool that people can log in and do training. And so that became really valuable for people onboarding and training from home. And we've to try to aid, people, I think one of the most important parts of onboarding new employees is helping them develop connections with their coworkers. So we've tried to find some creative ways of doing that. There's an app in our Slack, our internal messaging tool, Slack. I don't know what we ever would have done without that. We used it a lot before the pandemic, but now it's probably our primary tool for communication. There are apps you can install in there. There's one called Donut that randomly connects us with people to have a one-on-one that's just for the purpose of casual conversation. So we've had to get over the awkwardness of scheduling impromptu casual conversation, that can be awkward. Like, hey, let's schedule a time to talk about nothing. But you kind of have to do that now because, our schedules get really full with lots of video calls and we get down to business and try to respect everyone's time. But we've had to learn to actually schedule in time to just talk to each other as human beings as well, and spend a little time in the beginning of our video calls to get to know each other better and ask each other how we're doing and check on each other. So again, it's a situation of, we had some tools in place before. We've had to really lean on them even more. And then recruiting is interesting because the market seems to be changing a bit, because in our industry and others, candidates have so many more choices because there are so many more companies offering fully remote work. So now people who live here are able to explore working for companies all over the world, pretty much. And so we're figuring out what is this going to look like? How do we compete with those other employers? Are they offering different kinds of salaries than we are, or different kinds of benefits? So, do they have the kind of company culture they had before? If we start recruiting more fully remote workers, will parts of our culture get lost? We don't want that to happen. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's perfect. I think some extra considerations in there that I know we're all ruminating on as well. So it was really helpful. Okay, let's look forward a little bit, or not a little bit, let's look forward a lot into some long-term solutions. We've spent a fair amount of time thinking about where these organizations are at now, what they've done to basically survive up until this point. But let's look forward, if we will, if we can. Curious from the group, and I'll toss this out to anybody, any of the panelists. What do you think are the solutions or support that your organization needs now, either from the community or other organizations, other businesses around you? Or what solutions has your organization thought about to really be strategic about the future to ensure your workforce success moving back into the office under that realm? Cass, do you want to start us out?
Sure. I think for us, right, the besides the disruption, right, the biggest headwind or risk that we face is making sure that students come back in the fall, right, and that we have a really, really strong new student population. We had a little bit of a fall off, and I mean, other universities were anticipating a dire decline in students. We did not see a dire decline in students, but we did see a little bit of decline in freshmen this year, and we had been on track for a record freshman class. So, obviously one of the big things that we are focused on is recruitment, and we feel like those recruitment and applications have been very, very strong. It's interesting. There's a lot of change in the higher education sphere right now. The sort of top universities in the country and the world are seeing a lot more applications. So we don't know what exactly that is and how that will, when the final bell rings and people write checks and make decisions to go to particular universities, what that will look like. So that's obviously one of the most important things is being focused on making sure that students come to university, right? We hope they come to the University of Oregon, but we really need as a society people to be excited about going to college and recommitting to higher education. So I would say that is one area that we're really focused on. Another area moving forward is that we really have seen, and this is not just in higher education, but kind of everywhere not at the University of Oregon, but really everywhere in higher education, this really large unequal impact on, particularly on women in their research careers. And women who have children at home in particular have really seen a real decline in their ability to conduct research. And so as we, in addition to sort of moving forward in the instructional space, we're going to think really hard about how we support the recovery of the research careers of people who, particularly those who do particular kinds of research that were either very, very disrupted or still completely disrupted, like the people who study kids in schools, or need to, there's a zillion of those kinds of examples, but also the people who had children at home and the unequal. There's really interesting studies about the unequal impacts of even among men and women who have children at home. And then I would say the third, the third thing was really good, and now I can't remember it. Oh, right. Economic development. Sorry. One of the things that's been really great about this time actually has been the strengthening collaborations between the University of Oregon and Onward Eugene and Tau and many others, and working together to really think about what economic recovery looks like for our community. We've been very excited, and there's a number of people on the I see in the chat, like Tina Goldberg and Matt Sayre and others, the Uofo and elsewhere, that are really working together. And we recently, as Onward was the lead applicant for an EDA grant that's really focused on economic redevelopment around in the innovation space. And with Night Campus opening in the middle of the pandemic, we're really excited to be doubled down on those topics as a community recovery strategy, of which we feel like the University of Oregon really wants and needs to be a key player in. So I think those are the three things I'm thinking about as we look further down the road. Celeste?
That's great. Thank you. Amanda Walkup, do you want to talk about future solutions support?
So I guess from the judicial system, it's been an interesting transition because, of course, certain things have to keep going. Criminal trials, they're entitled to speedy trials, and so those are happening. It's amazing how we all pivoted, and a lot of stuff is happening on Zoom, or we can't expect jurors to come in an environment that's not safe, and so the jury trials that are happening with a lot of creative thought, but it is teaching all of us that what we've been doing in the past is not what we have to be doing into the future. And as we talk about even depositions, and it was not uncommon for us to catch a flight to go someplace far away for a one-day deposition and then come back. And now we do it on Zoom, and it's fantastic, and everybody loves it because you didn't have to leave your house, and yet at the same time you're probably 90% there. So from the judicial system, it's amazing how resilient everybody has been and how much more reliance we have on technology and kind of breaking us out of practices from the past. And I expect that a lot of that will continue to happen, whether it be me no longer having to drive up to Portland if I have a case in front of Multnomah County judge, or points beyond. So in my world, that is becoming kind of a thing as we're talking about future trials and future hearings and things like that, what that's going to look like.
Great. Amanda Yankovic, do you want to talk a little bit about solutions or support that your organization has thought about, or what you think, things that you have thought about in terms of long-term recovery?
Yeah, I think I really want to be able to be a resource for the community to really see if co-working is right for your business. I think this is an option that a lot of companies haven't even started to think about. And I would love to, have those conversations and see if we can kind of talk through your goals, your business's goals long term, and see if co-working does make sense for the collaboration and just the ease of this transition. I think for a lot of businesses, it might make sense, or some type of hybrid model, right? So that's something that I want to be able to support the community with. And, if anyone wants to get in touch with me, I would love to share more about co-working and really help kind of the greater community understand what this co-working model is and what the future of work looks like in the co-working world.
Great, thank you. Let's see, Celeste, do you want to jump in on that one as well, in terms of maybe even to the point that Cass added about increasing communication between sectors, between education and private and public sector?
Yeah, thanks, Celeste. Yeah, what we are noticing is that part of something that might prevent us from being able to plan ahead as much as we would like to, and of course, we've learned this past year, there are some things you just can't plan for. But we would, if there could be some kind of resource where sectors can communicate really quickly and efficiently across sectors together to stay up to date on things like what does the school district's plan this spring really look like? What are those kids' schedules going to look like? Then our employees who are parents can plan, employers can plan to understand better, like how much we can expect from parents or how we can best support them. And, when things change in the public sector, and like the CDC just came out with new guidelines for what fully vaccinated people can safely do together. Is that getting updated in OSHA? Is that, when state or county makes new regulations, how do we get that information out as quickly as possible to everyone so that we can efficiently plan and change plans on a moment's notice as they need to do these days? I don't know what the solution looks like, but that's my request, is if someone can invent something that helps us all communicate better, that would be great.
That's great. Okay, let's jump into some audience questions. I know we had a few come up in the chat, so if anybody else has additional questions that they want to add, be sure to put them in the chat and we'll try and manage them in real time. One of the questions that came up, I'm curious if Jeremy wants to jump in on it from just from your own experience about accommodating employees who are not ready to come back, or dealing with employees that when they come back, it's a different performance scenario at that point. Curious if you've experienced that.
Yeah, I think that, you know, it's going to be my long-term goal, and, you know, to finish up on the conversation we just had, is to provide an effective, streamlined, safe environment for my employees. And that's first and foremost what I'm looking to do. And with the, you know, with the adverse situation of dealing with people coming back to work face to face and trying to be like, hey, you're not vaccinated yet, would you want to come back to work and serve hundreds of people a day? It's kind of a hard sell, but it's also the people that are also working in this industry have been out of work now for multiple months, if not a year. So I think there is a lot of people willing to come back to work. All of my employees, thankfully, I haven't had that issue, and it's been, you know, everybody wants to get back into the swing of things. And even though, you know, I think that hopefully we can have this vaccine roll out, especially for in-person workers, like restaurant, grocery, hospitality workers, comes on board and we can move forward. I think that that's going to improve, you know, the relationships between employers and employees, and trying to like move forward with that, and people feeling comfortable to come back to work. So
that's great. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
All right, Amanda Walkup, I have a good one for you. 2 parts. How long do we accommodate employees who are not ready to be face-to-face with the public? That's number 1. Second part is, if the remote worker comes back and we're not seeing them performing at the same level that they were previously, how does one handle a possible separation?
So
from the audience, not me.
Yeah, no, that's fair. So, okay, as to number 1, keep in mind that employees do have certain paid leave or protected leave rights under both federal law and state law. Briefly, the FFCRA, Fair Family Coronavirus Relief Act, FFCRA, that was passed back in March of 2020. So that created a tax credit to give employees paid leave, but it's really for a very limited purpose, and also is for a limited period of time. So that leave, the mandatory portion ended in December of 2020. It was extended to March 31 of 2021 on a voluntary basis. And rumor has it, at least what I've seen of the last draft that would just pass the Senate. So the new, what are they calling it? The American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, which is what has just passed the Senate, is now back to the House. That continues to expand on the FFCRA, making it also voluntary, but it expands certain rights. So first thing is, these employees that do not want to come back to work, you got to run them through the formula to figure out, number 1, are you going to voluntarily allow the FFCRA to continue to work in your workplace? And if so, do these folks fit? If they do not fit, or you're not going to allow them, you then have to, if you've got 25 or more employees, you've got to run them through your OFLA, your Oregon Family Leave Act formula, to figure out, do they have any protections under the Family Leave Act? And or number 3, do they have any disabilities? If the answer to all of that is no, and it's more, I am just concerned, I am nervous, I have anxiety, well, anxiety might be a disability, but I'm just nervous about this. If that's where the person is living, the chances are they don't have any protections. And again, you need to run this through your lawyer. But at that point, it's really a judgment call. Can you allow them to work from home? Keeping in mind, under Oregon OSHA rules right now, you are supposed to be allowing them to work from home. In fact, you're supposed to be making them work from home if they can work from home. So if it's your personal choice as the employer, gee, I'd love to see everybody's shiny faces, but you really cannot justify bringing them back, you forcing that employee to come back could be you violating state law. So you've got to make sure that you're doing it for the right reason, that it's all compliant. And at that point, if you do need them to come back and they don't have any protected rights, then you would be looking at what is it that you want to do. And that would be an employer decision. Question in the chat, FFCRA, they eliminated the mandatory piece of it on the end of 2020, but they've extended it on a voluntary basis through March, and they're probably going to extend that to September. So right now, employers have the option. So, you know, and I'm getting a lot of calls, and a lot of, and the thing is, it's, you know, you put them on leave, Do you need to fire them? Then the reality is at this point, people are making some money on unemployment. So sometimes letting somebody go and then having them on recall rights when and if this everything calms down may be a win-win for everybody. Rumor has it that, again, this new bill that's pending is going to increase that kicker from 300, I think, to 400 or whatever the number is. So anyway, so there are some options for you to explore. It's not necessarily written in sand, but before you cut somebody loose, make sure you've evaluated whether they have any protected rights. Otherwise, you could be violating state or federal law. Number 2, really quickly. What was number 2?
How do we, I think you hit it. How do we accommodate employees who are not ready to be back, which you hit it. Yep, we're good. We did it. I'm going to take the written in sand and write that one down. I like that. Not quite written in sand. Okay, one of the questions that came up was, how are you measuring employee sentiment about returning to the office? So anyone who, assuming that you are constantly looking for touchstones with your employees, any unique ways of doing that, or just insight into how you're doing that. Celeste, do you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, we have been doing that occasionally throughout the past year. I remember, maybe in May of last year, we started thinking maybe we'd be able to come back to the office soon, but it didn't happen. So we keep doing new surveys and so we might do surveys with, something simple like a Google form or something. And but also I really like, depending on managers are so crucial to maintaining connections and communication throughout this situation. So much. They've been really helpful for me to understand how everybody's doing and feeling and what support they need, and for getting information from leadership to employees, and also letting company leadership know how employees are feeling. So I think that's a great way of getting sentiment from employees because it's so much more personal, and it just continues to enrich the relationship between managers and the people they manage, to really know each other and feel comfortable talking about how they feel and what they need, what they want. So depending on managers, with an occasional, typical survey form, it might be anonymous, although honestly in our company, we try to, have a culture that encourages enough transparency that people feel comfortable having it not be anonymous. Sometimes in anonymous surveys, we get requests for support that we can't really deliver because we don't know who needed it. So a combination of anonymous and also, identified feedback.
Great, thank you. Cass, do you want to hit on that one from the, obviously a much different perspective?
Yeah,
I know you touched on it a little bit before, but
I was just trying to think about how to summarize the myriad of ways of which we've been engaging faculty and staff on these questions. And it's changed over time, and it's really depended on the particulars of the employee group. So, for example, the provost's office each quarter, or in the run-up to each quarter, has done surveys to say who wants to teach in person, who wants to teach remotely, and that helps drive which sort of decision making about which courses are in what kind of status. And some classes sort of can't be, it's really hard to teach certain classes remotely, and so there's not a lot of flexibility in that space. In other classes, it's easier. But that's just one part of our employee group. And I think what Celeste pointed out is actually really a lot of how, for our administrative and classified staff, we've really worked on these issues, which is a lot of communication through managers, through supervisors, and then bringing issues up, or frankly, also directly communicating with our employee, through the union or the employee group representatives to really understand where people are, where their head is at, whether they're feeling safe, whether they feel like there are opportunities for improvements in our safety plans, or the remote work or in-person work. And so we've been, to some extent, we've been using every line of communication we can think of to try to really solicit input. We've done one of the things that the research office started doing early on to solicit input was we've been doing a sort of Zoom town halls. And then what we've been doing in this space because we needed to reopen research, really, frankly, before everybody else was thinking about how to maybe bring people back in partially, because of the way in which research works. You can't leave expensive equipment and lots of research facilities unoccupied, and people were completely stalled. Like Amanda said, we're supposed to be working at home from if you can, but some people could not do anything until they came back in person. So we've been reopening research in a very stepwise, one step at a time. Open it. Okay, did that work? Did it cause any problems? Okay, let's go to the next step. And before each one of those, we've drafted plans, and then we've held town halls and invited anybody who's interested to give us feedbacks and say, well, wait, but that doesn't work for me because my lab does this. And I think people have really liked that because they've had an ability to weigh in on their fate and really helped us make the plans work better. But sort of the take-home message for the Uofo is we're such a diverse workplace that how we engage our employees is super varied depending on the kind of employee they are.
Right. That's helpful. Thank you. So you touched on a bit of a subject around what are the positive things that we would take moving forward. I like some of the things that you were saying there. I think that's a good question to end or to ride out on. Jeremy, why don't you, if you could, just kind of throw out there what are the most positive impacts that have happened in your in the restaurant or the bar industry, and that you will in fact take into the future that you've learned, either lessons or just positive impact.
Well, I think that the positives that's come out of this whole situation is the outreach of community support, which obviously all the small businesses in this town need. The restaurant is in serious need of community support, but the outreach has been amazing. And also the teamwork that was created through the relationships with my employees and my managers, and how we became a solid, cohesive unit. And that goes along with the restaurants, all the restaurants in town, and the brother and sisterhood that was created with all of us, like my neighborly restaurants in my area, and the people that are in the same situation, and seeing the support has come from them, and the support that we've tried to give out as well. But that's amazing. That's been the best and most positive thing for me that's come out of this, and just trying to learn how we're going to adapt and adjust and try to learn how to deal with the future of the restaurant and hospitality industry. So with that being said, I think that, having the community support and really, making the effort to get out and eat at your local eatery, whichever one that one may be, and trying to push that to everybody, and that message to everybody is important. But yeah.
That's great. Thank you. How about anybody else? What are the most positive changes that you plan to take into the future? Amanda, do you want to jump in on that? Or Celeste or Cass? Cass kind of touched on it, so I'll give it to you.
Well, I'll just say one more thing, because I really, what Jeremy just said really rang true to me as well. I mean, right, Jeremy, at sort of opposite ends of the employer between, although we have foods and hospitality as well, but right. I think the extent to which Lane County and Eugene and Springfield have come together as a community, and that we've been a part of that has been amazing. From our, unified emergency response and vaccines and testing and really just in economic redevelopment, I think that's been really powerful. And I really, really hope that continues into the future. And similarly, interestingly, among the higher education institutions, Jeremy, the story you just told of becoming closer collaborators or allies with your neighboring restaurants, that's really happened with the universities across the country, and actually in the other universities in the state. So those relationships and the learning we've done really feels valuable to me, and something that I want to make sure lasts a really long time into the future.
Thank you. It's beautiful. Celeste, do you want to jump in on just culture impacts at PAS?
Yeah, I thought I wanted to ditto what Cass was just saying about the relationships. I think more than anything, something I've seen improve and grow throughout this past year is our empathy for each other and our willingness to just, you know, now it's becoming more commonplace in a professional format to ask someone how they're doing and to make it commonplace to talk about things like mental health and, you know, find creative ways, employers finding creative ways to support employees in that way, their personal needs, balancing all the different parts of their life to find, you know, work-life balance or integration or whatever it is people need. That is truly, I think, something that I hope we all carry forward for the future on forever is just, you know, more personal connections and being comfortable with, you know, taking our relationships with the people we work with seriously. That you know, that impacts our ability to do good work and to make profits as well. You know, that we work well together, we care about each other, and we're all looking out for each other's best interest. I'm really grateful for that part of the experience we've been having.
Great. Okay. Sally, do you want to take it away? We're getting
Sure.
closer. Either that or Amanda can jump in on that last question if you wanted to round it out.
Either Amanda, you're more than, we still have a few minutes if you want to weigh in.
Celeste, I think that was just beautifully said. And I think we have learned a lot about, I think, ourselves and our employees and, you know, the folks that we interact with or we used to interact with on a day-to-day basis. And I think carrying that on to the future, and whether your community is around you every single day or if it is still in a virtual capacity, I think that will be important. You know, that really helps with mental health, that helps with the collaborative feeling of community and all of that. So I think that was really, really wonderfully said. And I think that's something we should all keep into consideration as we move forward.
Great. Perfect. Amanda, walk up. Do you want to jump in on that one? I'm not going to let you get away with that, apparently.
We're not going to let me get away with it. I really have nothing to add. I agree with everything that everyone has said, and I think it's important for us just to be gracious with each other and just to show some human compassion. And, you know, not everything's an emergency all the time, and just be aware and open to other people's situations. That's all I got.
Perfect. All right. Great way to end.
Thank you all so much. Celeste, you did a fabulous job. Thank you from TAO and Onward Eugene. We appreciate our sponsors, Lane Workforce and Evans, Elder, Brown, and Subert, and the district co-working. Come on down and work with me in the spring. And just an outstanding conversation with these delightful panelists. So thanks for dedicating so much time this afternoon. This recording will be placed on our YouTube channel for further reference to share with colleagues and folks. And keep in mind, this is time sensitive, so this is relevant today, but perhaps not next month, but certainly really valuable right now to be able to have it. So we welcome you to engage with us in the future. Check out our future events. We can't wait to see you in person when it's safe again. Enjoy your afternoon and be well.